Elena Ward's old backpack slid softly to the floor as she took her seat, 12F. The faded eagle patch flashed briefly under the cabin light. Several eyes in business class immediately darted her way. A raised brow, a tight smile, a short whisper. Chief Attendant Victoria Cross glanced at the boarding pass and held back a strained smile, as if this seat wasn't meant for someone like Elena. She pulled the backpack closer under the seat and said nothing. Her fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the armrest. A young passenger raised his phone, snapping quickly. The screen glow reflected on a half smile, half sneer. A few chuckles rippled through the cabin. Elena stayed silent, eyes fixed outside. Before we go any further, can you do me a small favor? Grab your phone, hit the like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Elena Ward slid into seat 12F. Her old backpack dropped beneath the seat, the worn eagle patch catching the cabin light for a beat. The frayed gray hoodie made her stand out in a business class full of suits, cologne, and scrutinizing stares. Chief Attendant Victoria Cross had noticed her when she checked the ticket. Uniform crisp, a thin smile on her lips, but judgment in her eyes. She didn't need words. Just the faint curl of her mouth told Elena she didn't belong here. The man with the Rolex beside her tilted his head, gaze running top to bottom, then lit up his tablet with an audible sigh of annoyance. In the row ahead, a woman in a silk scarf leaned in to whisper, hand covering her mouth, eyes glinting as if she had found some entertainment. A young man lifted his phone, pretending to adjust the camera. The blue glow hit a smirking face. His thumb tapped quickly. On screen, "Can't believe she's in here." His friend leaned closer, chuckled. Elena sat still. She pulled a water bottle from the bag, twisted the cap, and drank. Her fingers tapped 3 steady beats on the armrest. An old memory flared in her mind. A night sky thick as ink, radios blaring, squad mates clinging to her voice to hold formation. Keep the rhythm. The command echoed inside, matching her tapping now. She blinked back to the present. The cabin glowed bright, heavy with cologne and wine. The contrast was sharp. Luxury on one side, her old hoodie and faded bag on the other. In their eyes, that detail alone was enough to cast her out. The food cart rolled up. A young attendant hesitated when reaching her row, but Victoria followed, heels firm, eyes skimming the hoodie. She moved on without leaving a tray. The Rolex man was served with a polite smile, while Elena's table stayed empty. A short laugh burst from the row ahead. The silk scarf woman bent over her phone, fingers flicking fast. A tweet appeared. "Front row view. Not everyone belongs here." The tap to post sounded faint, sharp as a blade. Elena didn't look. Her eyes locked on the window. Outside, the sky shifted pale gold, clouds sliding by. Her fingers kept the 3-beat rhythm. Ordinary to anyone else, but her anchor in the thick undercurrent of scorn. No one in the cabin spoke out loud. With just glances, messages, and tight smiles, Elena was pushed outside their circle. Business class became a silent courtroom, and she, alone at 12F, was the quiet defendant. The food cart rattled along the aisle, wheels humming. The scent of red wine and coffee mixed in the air. Passengers adjusted suits, opened laptops, and traded murmurs. Victoria Cross led with her trained smile. Trays set down in rhythm, red wine poured smoothly. But at seat 12F, her eyes stopped on the frayed gray hoodie. A slight curl of her lips, then she moved on. Elena's table stayed bare. The Rolex man received his tray and gave a sidelong glance. No words were needed. His look alone underlined the divide. Elena twisted open her water, sipping slowly. The click echoed oddly against the clatter of cutlery. Up front, The silk scarf woman leaned into her phone. On the bright screen is a photo of Elena from earlier times. Caption: "Not everyone belongs in business class." One tap, posted. Her friend covered a laugh, eyes sharp as blades. Across the aisle, a young man's phone buzzed with the notification. He laughed, angled the screen toward his seatmate. Both smirked, pretending to gaze outside, but the twitch of their mouths betrayed them. Elena caught it in her periphery. She didn't react. Her eyes clung to the window. Fingers tapped 3 beats on the armrest. In her head, another memory. Darkness. Warning lights flashing. The squad waiting for a cue. 3 taps, the signal to keep formation. She inhaled, brought herself back. No one in the cabin needed to speak loudly. A glance, a message passed along, a hidden smirk, enough to press her further into the corner. Elena sat isolated, made an outsider. Victoria reappeared, pausing at the aisle's end. Her gaze swept the rows, resting a second longer on 12F before she turned and strode off, heels sharper against the floor. Elena's hand slipped to her bag, fingers brushing the faded eagle patch. That small, worn symbol was the only anchor against the quiet tide of contempt. She stayed silent, eyes on the horizon burning gold outside the window. The cabin was a miniature social feed, every sneer, comment, photo, and post. And Elena, sitting alone at 12F, was at the center of a silent trial. After the meal, the cabin grew quieter. The clatter of keyboards, the faint scrape of cutlery remained. But at seat 12F, the tension had not lifted. The Rolex man snapped his tablet shut. He tilted his head, eyes sweeping over Elena, stopping at the frayed gray hoodie. His lip curled slightly, and in a low voice, loud enough for nearby rows, he said, "Hope you've got something better in that bag." A small laugh escaped from the row ahead. The silk scarf woman leaned to her friend, hand over mouth. But the sound cut off as soon as Elena turned her head. Her gaze locked straight on the Rolex man. Not angry, not disdainful, simply steady, deep. He froze for a beat, shoulders tight. "I'm fine." 3 short words fell into the cabin like a stone. The laughter died instantly. The Rolex man turned quickly, fumbling to reopen his tablet, fingers trembling slightly. The silk scarf woman set down her glass, smile gone. Eyes around the cabin darted away, pretending to be busy. Elena turned back to the window. Her fingers tapped slowly on the armrest. In her mind, a flash of memory. A night sky, the squadron holding formation, radios crackling, her voice having to stay short and firm to keep them calm. The image flickered, then dissolved. From a row ahead, a man with a loosened tie leaned back, voice loud. "Want to fly a plane?" A few chuckles followed, faint but intentional. Elena turned, her gaze sweeping across. Her voice came low, firm. "I've been near planes before." No one laughed again. The loosened tie man lowered his glass, lips pressed tight. The echoes faded, leaving only the drone of the engines. In the aisle, Victoria Cross observed, brows pinched. She said nothing, but her stride quickened, heels striking harder. The cabin sank into silence. No more smug glances, no more whispers of mockery, only a wary quiet. The mini-twist had landed. No long speech required. With just a few short words and a look, Elena cracked the atmosphere that had weighed against her. The woman in seat 12F was no longer a joke. The captain's voice came over the intercom, brief. The plane would make a refueling stop at Andrews Air Force Base. A routine note, but several passengers immediately straightened their jackets, checked calendars, as if about to step into a high-level meeting. Elena didn't move. She only tilted her head, eyes on the window. On the runway, rows of F-22s lined up, silver wings glinting in the afternoon sun. Her fingers brushed the faded eagle patch on her bag. A tiny detail, but enough to make a young attendant passing by pause for a second, eyes caught before she quickly moved on. The cabin door opened. A group of soldiers stepped in, uniforms sharp, boots striking firm. They greeted selected business passengers with crisp salutes. Social laughter filled the air, phones lifted for photos, and a few handshakes were exchanged. Then Commander Marcus Hale appeared. Tall frame, steady stride. He moved down the aisle, shaking hands as he went. But when his eyes reached row 12F, everything stopped. His gaze locked on Elena. He froze for a fraction. His hand still extended toward a businessman, but forgotten mid-gesture. The man looked puzzled, not knowing why. The cabin hadn't yet realized. Elena looked up. Her eyes were calm, almost as if expecting this moment. Marcus Hale strode straight to seat 12F. His steps echoed heavily, certain. When he stopped, his voice rang low and clear, without hesitation. "Midnight Viper." The words hit like thunder. The cabin froze solid. A glass of wine suspended mid-air. Phones stopped recording. The polite smiles turned to stone. Elena rose. Not rushed, not slow. She adjusted her bag strap, the worn patch flashing once under the light. Passengers followed every movement, eyes wide, lips parting, but no sound coming out. Marcus Hale inclined his head, voice firm. "Step outside." Elena walked. Old sneakers met the floor with crisp sound in the dead silence. The Rolex man swallowed hard, eyes fixed but unable to hold them. The silk scarf woman covered her mouth, whispering something to her friend, her tone trembling. The aircraft door opened, sunlight flooding in. Outside, the F-22 squadron stood aligned, uniforms sharp, eyes fixed on the stairway. Wind gusted strongly, engines thrumming in the air. Elena stepped down. The moment her shoes hit the tarmac, Marcus Hale's command rang out, cutting sharply through the air. "Attention! Salute Midnight Viper!" Dozens of arms snapped up at once. Movements are sharp and unified. The shout blended with the roar of the wind, forming an undeniable moment. Inside the cabin, passengers pressed to the windows. One with a phone forgot to hit record. The Rolex man's mouth opened, but no sound came. The silk scarf woman froze stiff, hands clutching her bag. Victoria Cross stood motionless in the aisle, eyes locked, her service logbook clenched tight in her grip. Elena stood tall, face toward the squadron. Her hand rose, the salute crisp, slicing the air like a blade. The gesture sealed the scene whole. The woman once whispered about, snickered at in seat 12F, was now honored by an elite squadron standing at attention. The afternoon sun stretched shadows long across the runway, the formation, and the lone figure in a faded hoodie. In that moment, no more words were needed. The afternoon light stretched across the runway. The F-22 pilots held their rigid stance, shadows long against the concrete. Elena Ward strolled forward, each step blending with the wind sweeping past distant turbines. Her faded gray hoodie flared slightly in the gusts, revealing the worn fabric underneath. Commander Marcus Hale stepped out, holding something carefully preserved. He stopped in front of Elena, his voice low and deliberate. "Yours." It was an old flight helmet, fabric discolored, and the inner padding was worn thin by years. But the embroidered words "Midnight Viper" still stood clear on the side. Elena accepted it. Calloused fingers traced the stitches. Memory burst open. A sky black as tar, red warning lights flashing, radios crackling. In that chaos, the squadron clung to her voice for direction. One mistake could have buried them all. But that night, they made it through. She lifted the helmet and placed it on her head. The motion was fluid, natural, as if it had never left her. The formation in front shifted subtly. Their eyes lit, something between reverence and relief. From the end of the line, a young pilot stepped forward. Still fresh-faced, but with determination already set in his eyes. In his hands was a small logbook, its edges frayed. He stopped before Elena, voice rough but steady. 3 years ago, you signed this for me. You wrote, "Discipline keeps you alive." I've carried every word. And the reason I'm still standing here today is because of you. He opened the book. On the page, her signature. Sharp, strong, etched deep like a command. Elena touched it, her hand trembling slightly. Her lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. You did it. Just 4 words, but they rang like a confirmation. The young pilot nodded hard, eyes bright, then snapped to attention, hand raised in salute. The line of pilots watched, faces hardening, eyes glowing. This moment was no longer just a ceremony. It had become a passing of the torch from one generation who survived the fire to another now carrying the sky. Inside the cabin, passengers still pressed to the windows. The Rolex man sat frozen, phone light still glowing in his trembling hand, unable to press another button. The silk scarf woman covered her mouth, but not to laugh. Only confusion remained. Victoria Cross stood locked in the aisle, eyes fixed outside. Her grip on the service logbook white-knuckled. Elena removed the helmet, holding it close. She needed no more words. The wind swept past, sharp and warm at once. On the stairway, she turned back to the squadron and gave a short nod. That nod made the entire line tighten their stance, a silent vow. They would continue on the foundation she had laid. Elena stepped back into the cabin. The hoodie faded, the shoes were still old, and the backpack was heavy on her shoulder. But the cabin was no longer the same. The air of luxury now carried a heavy silence. Everyone looked at her differently. No one dared exchange glances anymore. The Rolex man sat stiff, both hands locked on the tray table. Moments ago, he had curled his lip, whispered mockery. Now he swallowed hard, eyes down, as if trying to hide in the small space before him. The silk scarf woman clutched her bag, gaze avoiding. Her phone screen lit with notifications. The mocking photo of Elena now swarmed with backlash. Dozens of condemning comments. Her hand trembled as she flipped the phone face down. The proud look gone. Victoria Cross stood at the aisle's end. No trace of scorn in her eyes. She watched Elena pass, her expression softening for just a moment. Something inside her had shifted. Elena sat again at 12F, placed the backpack down, and the flight helmet rested on her lap. No one spoke. Only the steady hum of the engines filled the space. A business class once noisy now fell silent, as though 100 microphones had been switched off. The young attendant approached, a small box in hand. She stopped, voice shaky but sincere. On behalf of the crew, thank you for what you've done. Inside was a silver pin shaped like an eagle, gleaming under the cabin lights. Elena looked at her, eyes softening. She accepted it, fastening it to the strap of her bag. The simple gesture reflected light across the cabin, holding every gaze. Elena gave a slight nod. A faint smile passed her lips, rare but real. The young attendant pressed her hands tight against her chest, retreating with her face flushed, but her eyes shining brighter. The plane lifted. 2 F-22s flew in parallel outside the window, escorting wing to wing, faces pressed to the glass. Passengers watched, not mocking now, but remembering. Elena stared outside, fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the armrest. The rhythm was the same, steady. But now it was more than a way to stay calm. It had become the cadence of resolve, the same beat that had kept others alive, now proof for those who once doubted. No one in the cabin spoke again. The Rolex man quietly slipped off his watch, setting it on the table, eyes unsettled. The silk scarf woman gripped her bag tight, lips pressed shut. Victoria Cross let out a faint sigh, gaze following Elena, before giving the slightest nod. Elena looked at no one. She sat straight, eyes fixed on the sky streaked with sunset. The faded backpack was at her feet. The helmet was on her lap, and the silver eagle pin was gleaming brightly on the strap. The story closed not with explanation, but with presence.